You ever have one of those days where you'd wake up for school and just not want to do anything for that day? And not even for any particular reason, just the fact that your mind and body is so exhausted that you can't even drag yourself through the day? Well, that was me one day when I was 12. And even though I had made it through half of the day pretty easily, when free time came around, I was so fucking drained. And I usually played Foursquare with my friends during free time. However, I wasn't really feeling it that day. So I decided to sit up by the building where a lot of the kids would go to read or draw. And this was my first time ever sitting over here. I didn't realize they had assigned seating. To be real, I still have no clue if they actually do have assigned seats. But anyways, I was just sitting at the table outside, minding my own, with my head down when I see someone walk up to me out of the corner of my eye. So I lift my head up, and it's this kid who I'll be referring to as Greg. And now, for some context on Greg, he was a bit of a basket case. There was really no point in trying to argue with him because he would pretty much go to the teacher and have his way about 90% of the time. And so a lot of our classmates didn't really get along with Greg. Anyways, after I lift my head up and see Greg, I didn't want to start any issues, so I said, "Hey, what's up?" And Greg immediately caught some lip with me. It was like I was working the drive-thru and he asked for a Coke and I told him all we had was Pepsi products. So Greg's sitting here chatting my ear off about how there are assigned seats and if I want to sit up at the tables I need to go and talk to the teachers first to get an assigned seat. To which I responded by explaining I didn't know. And so I got up and moved to an empty table because I figured I was sitting in Greg's spot and if I moved he would cut me some slack. But that wasn't the issue. No, 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 no. When Greg saw that I didn't get up and leave the entire vicinity, he must have saw me as a threat to his castle or something because I'm sitting here once again minding my own when suddenly some big ass blunt object hits me in the back of the head. And rightfully so, I stand up confused and upset. I'm like, what the fuck? Now, when I get up, I see this black and blue trapper keeper, which I just saw Greg carrying. So I turn around and Greg's in my face saying that I'm disrespectful and I have no concern for others' personal space. Just having a full on breakdown in front of me, essentially. It was at this point that I didn't even want to listen to him anymore, so I picked Greg up and I fucking slammed him back down on his head. And of course, this is when the teachers decided to intervene. So now I have the teacher standing around Greg who's on the ground crying and rolling around, and I have another teacher who's twisting my arm behind my back whilst escorting me up to the principal's office. While there were threats from Greg's mom about how she was, and I quote, gonna show that little freak some manners, she was quickly silenced when the school showed security footage of Greg assaulting me first. However, I was still suspended, and while my parents weren't happy with me, I wasn't being punished necessarily, so I pretty much just got to go home and chill. But one day, a homie of mine who I'll call Nate had also got to stay home from school one day, and I was left alone most days while on suspension because both of my parents worked full time. So Nate and I decided to sneak out and go to the park that was a few blocks from both our houses. Now, my grandma had just came back from Arizona, and with her, she brought me a football that was signed by Carson Palmer of the Arizona Cardinals, which I do have another story, but I'll save that for another day. And along with the football, she also brought me a basic Spalding basketball. And I brought this basketball with me when Nate and I went to the park. Now, once I get to the park, Nate's sitting over by the courts, so I just run over to him and we start shooting some hoops. And about 10ish minutes go by. We're in the middle of a game, Nate's defending me, and right as I go to shoot, someone yells out. And while it was probably going to be an air ball anyways, I'm going to blame it on this Neanderthal that I missed. Confused on what's going on, Nate and I look around and see these two other kids that I guess to be around 15 to 16 years old, and I yell back at them to see what the problem is, to which they yell again, but I still can't hear what they're yelling, so I yell out again, but this time to let them know that I can't hear them. After I yell at them this time, they started running towards us. When I hear one of them yell, "Did I say you could use my shit?" I look at Nate like, the fuck? And so they run up to us and start talking about how I need to give them their ball back, and that it ain't mine. So I throw the ball back to Nate and walk towards the bigger guy because he was the one claiming it was his ball. And I mean, people did leave basketballs all the time at this court for kids to use, but even then, those aren't necessarily owned by someone, they're just there. So I'm confused, and while trying to explain that my grandma just gave that to me, he shoved me back and said, "I didn't ask. I want my ball." Now, it's at this point that I realize that he's just trying to pick on us because we're smaller. So I look at this grotesque Baymax looking fuck, and I just laugh. He's sitting here looking confused and asks, "What's so funny?" I look back at Nate, and as I turn back around, I swing on this dude. So now Nate's running back to his house while I'm fighting this guy who's towering over me. His friend's in the back hyping him up as I kick his ass. Eventually we end up wrestling on the ground and he tries to roll onto his stomach, so I get the back mount and I take a handful of these tiny rocks that were meant to soften the ground at the playground and I shove these rocks under his shirt and I just start hammer fisting all of these rocks into his back. After landing a few of those blows, he eventually elbows me and we start wrestling again. And this is when his friend decided to step in because he comes over and pulls Oogie Boogie off of me. And I just remember his friend going, "Oh fuck, we gotta go, we gotta go." And then they both ran off. As they're running off, I'm sitting here talking my shit, and I try to stand up with my left leg, and that's when I felt a huge sharp pain at my lower left side, and this pain sent me back to my knees. Naturally, I look down, and that's when I see my shirt and pants soaked, and a tiny little Swiss Army knife sticking out of me. So I stand up, and I'm sitting here thinking, fuck, that can't be good. So I pull it out, and while it was one of those 1 inch blades, it still fucking hurt. And once I pulled it out, the pain just got worse. At this point, I'm no longer running off adrenaline. I was starting to feel really woozy and lightheaded, so I just started limping back to my house, which is like 5 to 6 blocks away from the park. And as I'm walking, I remember not even being concerned with the fact that I was just stabbed, but being worried about how my parents were going to react. Eventually, I make it to the street that my house is on, and what do you know? I run into my older sister who also wasn't supposed to be out of the house. Here she is, walking with her boyfriend at the time, and they're both trying to act like I'm in the wrong, and were insisting that they were going to tell my parents, to which I responded with, "You don't say anything, I won't say anything." They reluctantly agree and help me back to the house. Once they situate me inside with some towels to help stop the bleeding, they head back out. After about 2 minutes, I was sitting there feeling really lightheaded, still bleeding. I knew I couldn't just leave it how it was. So I went into my parents' room and grabbed a needle from my mom's sewing kit, and grabbed some of the thinnest fishing line that my dad had. Pulled up a self-suturing tutorial on YouTube, and gave myself 3 stitches. I changed into a different outfit and threw my old clothes into a Walmart grocery bag and threw it into the main garbage, as I wasn't planning on telling my parents about the events of today. In fact, I continued to spend the next few weeks hiding it from them till it was healed, and even then, I didn't tell them about it. To be honest, I didn't even tell them until after I turned 18. But yeah, all that shit over a basketball. Just thought this was pretty crazy, wanted to share it. So yeah, see ya.